Bert, you just put out a video.
You've made 2 already.
You have over 80 views. When will it be enough?
You've got to
burn
slow
out.
down.
Too hard.
You're flying too close to the sun.
You can't keep burning the candle at both ends.
Please, for the love of God, take a break.
No. See, I was well on my way to shattering my current pace of a new video every 3 months or so at the behest of my legions of fans. But I had to pause all of that because I saw this one too many times.
Okay, so if we're coming into 2026, the quarterbacks that I have ahead of Joe Burrow, well, my top 5 quarterbacks, let me say it differently. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Matthew Stafford, and Drake Maye.
The first 4 are objectively correct. Put them in whatever order you'd like, but those are the 4. Then we get to 5. Now, I understand that some doubts have arisen about Joe Burrow after a hectic few years in Cincinnati, and all in all, I understand that completely. But this is absurd. I mean, there's no argument for this, and yet I am seeing it more and more. Now, I'll just save us some time and assume I know the reasons for Maye's rapid ascent because, well, I do. His statistical brilliance, headlined by an incredible completion rate, leading his team to a surprising Super Bowl appearance in just his second year, and MVP finalist honors. Wait, no, I'm sorry, that's Joe Burrow's resume. Can we pull up Maye's? Okay, they're pretty similar, but to see the differences, we're going to have to look a little closer. It's true that Drake Maye excelled on paper in his best year, either leading the league or near the top in most categories. It's also true that Joe Burrow's done that too, and arguably a little better. Just one season before Maye's breakout effort, Burrow was the most productive quarterback in football, leading the league in both yards and touchdowns, putting up totals that Maye has never even grazed. In fact, a healthy Joe Burrow has literally never in his career been less statistically productive, meaning yards and touchdowns, than Drake Maye's MVP runner-up campaign, often in fewer games. But back to comparing their best years, because Maye was stronger in certain key areas, notably passer rating, which was due to his superior yards per attempt, and completion percentage. And while Maye's 72% completion rate is certainly impressive, it's hard to put too much weight behind it given that we're currently comparing him to the man with the best career completion percentage in NFL history. So the point is, while Maye's year last year was incredible, it was far from uncharted waters for Joe Burrow, who, when healthy, averages 40 touchdowns and almost 4,700 yards per season. I mean, hell, Burrow just about matched or exceeded many of Maye's sophomore successes in his own second year in one fewer game. But as with all stats, we have to look at them with context. So what could some of the context be? Maybe that Joe Burrow has 2 elite receivers to throw to, and Drake Maye had a middling group of players around him, which is true. In fact, Joe Burrow has arguably the best 1-2 punch in football. But here's the thing. Drake Maye has arguably the most accomplished OC of all time and a top 5-ish head coach. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow has Zach Taylor and friends. Yes, 24 Burrow had a sizable weapons advantage, but 25 Maye had a sizable coaching and play calling advantage, an astronomically better defense, and a softer schedule than Joe Burrow has ever had, which to me is more than enough to explain the 5-win difference between the two teams. Frankly, there may have been a 5-game swing in the defenses alone, with the 2024 Bengals ranking 25th in both yards and points per game, while the 25 Patriots were 8th in yards and 4th in points. But maybe that's just more context, right? Burrow's defense was awful. Of course he had inflated numbers. He probably threw up a bunch of garbage time stats. No, he didn't. In fact, almost every loss the Bengals suffered that year was a 1-score game, with the sole exception of Week 8 against the Eagles. But that might not tell the full story either. Maybe these were blowouts late, and then Burrow put up a bunch of points in garbage time to even it out towards the end. No. These were the scores at the start of the fourth quarter in every loss. They were pretty much all 1-score games. In fact, the Bengals were leading in almost half of them. And the 5 times that they trailed entering the fourth were the only games that happened all season. Yes, this defense was bad, but the Bengals were not getting garbage time stats in late-game blowouts. They were trading punches all game, and the defense routinely blinked first. That said, it is still true that Joe Burrow is more of a high-volume passer than Drake Maye, and that sounds like context. 2024 Burrow had 160 more pass attempts than Drake Maye last year, which could absolutely explain his superior counting stats. To find out, we just have to compare production per attempt. And what you'll find is that the increased attempts definitely assisted his yardage total. However, on a per-pass basis, he was still more efficient and productive than Maye in scoring and ball security through the air. Plus, his completion percentage is arguably more impressive given the much larger sample size. So to recap, Burrow at his best has either matched or exceeded just about every statistical accomplishment that Maye achieved at his best. But statistical success was only one part of his resume. Let's move on to Maye's improbable Super Bowl run, because in just his second year, he led his team all the way to the big game, which Joe Burrow had... I'm sorry? You're not going to believe this. They both led their teams to the Super Bowl in just their second year, and they both lost. But those losses were not made equal. First up, the playoff runs. This is a segment I like to call Whose Super Bowl Run Is It? It's a lot like a blind comparison, except that you already know both of the players, and deep down you know that yes, the better one is Joe Burrow. It's nothing like a blind comparison. Yes, Maye had 2 extra touchdowns, one on the ground and one through the air. But he also had 4 times the amount of turnovers, almost 300 fewer yards, 7 fumbles, a significantly worse passer rating, and a significantly lower completion percentage with similar offensive line play. While Maye played the worst football of his career in his first playoff run, Burrow was largely able to maintain his standard, all leading up to the big game. Now, outside of the turnovers, Maye's doesn't look too bad. But you remember when we agreed that context is important? That's right. For those of you who wanted me to talk about garbage time stats and fourth quarter blowouts, I have fantastic news. This was Maye through the first 55 and a half minutes of the Super Bowl. It was one of the worst offensive performances in years. Maye had 60 passing yards through 3 quarters and got shut out for the first 47 and a half minutes. In fact, 40% of their offensive plays went for 0 or negative yards, and 57% of their drives ended in a 3-and-out or a turnover. Fortunately for the box score, down 22 with under 5 minutes to play and the defense already celebrating, Maye took over. Meanwhile, Burrow's game was much more consistent. He had 60 yards in the first quarter, wildly outpacing Maye's 3-quarter production. The Bengals' offense scored points in every quarter, never found themselves down by more than 10 points, and led for almost the entire second half until they lost by 3 on downs in the final minute. So the playoff and Super Bowl comparison isn't even close, and that's only accounting for each player's second year. Burrow has reached the AFC Championship game in both of his playoff appearances. So now all we're left with is the MVP, and yes, Drake Maye finished second, which is higher than Burrow has ever placed, by a whopping 2 spots. No, Burrow has never gotten second, but he has gotten fourth twice. And may I remind you that neither player has actually won an MVP, so I'll take the 2-time finalist over the 1-time finalist. Especially when the 2-time finalist has had the competition he had. 6 players have finished higher than Burrow in his 2 finalist seasons combined. 4 of them were 40-plus touchdown quarterbacks, and 1 was a 2,000-yard, 15-touchdown Saquon Barkley. Meanwhile, Maye lost the MVP award to literally the only quarterback in football last year to put up 40 touchdowns. So Burrow's statistical peaks have been higher, his performances on the biggest stages have been better, his MVP results have been comparable, and he's done all of these things more. But tell me again what Drake Maye has done to kick him out of this conversation, because I don't get it. If it's the injuries, that feels like a cop-out. It feels like saying Drake Maye has only outplayed Joe Burrow when Joe Burrow hasn't played, especially given how weird his injuries have been. And don't pretend we haven't punished him for missing the playoffs. A couple of years ago, he was locked into everybody's top 3, but there are not 5 better quarterbacks than Joe Burrow right now. Look, despite what this entire video might have sounded like, this is not the Drake Maye hate train. I actually really like Drake Maye. He's an immensely talented top 10 quarterback with a very bright future, and he can climb that list as early as this year depending on what he accomplishes. But there are people, right now, today, putting him at 5, and there's just not a single argument for that. So I urge you, as excited as we all are about Drake Maye, he is not Joe Burrow. Yet.